Bart, are you okay from here?
Yep. I'm really excited that I'm actually going to speak after Linda and Anissa, because normally when I give this speech, I always really struggle to explain why we need learning design. But because you've done a fantastic job, I don't need to do this. Normally I always start with a metaphor, and this metaphor is this little boy. And for those who've already seen this presentation, who is this boy? It's not me. Who is this boy? It's not my son. I wish it was my son. Let me show you a different picture of him. This is him as well. It's a boy called Max Verstappen. He was 17 years old when he was driving here in Singapore. He didn't own a driving license, right? In the Netherlands, he's not allowed to buy a beer, but he is driving in a Formula One car in one of the most competitive automotive sports in the world. So how is it possible that a boy of 17 can actually be successful in Formula One? Any guesses? Why would it be successful? And what's the link with learning design? Sorry? His father. He has a great coach. He has a great coach in the sense that his father was a failed Formula One driver. Failing leads to lots of learning. What is another thing why he is so successful, that at the age of 17 he was able to, well, he's currently number 10 in the world in Formula One. He's 17 years old. How is it possible? Any guesses? Inherent abilities, yes. Yes, you've seen my talk already before. He still lives at home at his parents, of course, as you do as a millionaire. But every time when he's back, he trains for 3 to 4 hours, continuously racing the track. So he has never been to Singapore before, but he has seen the track already hundreds and hundreds of hours, right? So the power, and that links very well to the keynote this morning, is yes, learning is great, learning analytics is great, but if you can't really understand what the role of feedback, of what the interactions is, this is cool, because every time when he drives too fast through a corner, he gets off. So you immediately get loads of feedback, and of course he gets it wrong at times. I mean, this is what is in Monaco. And then the next question is always then, okay, what is the link with learning design? Max Verstappen is currently 10th in Formula One, but you have world champions who are Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, who are currently number 19 and number 20. How can it be that a guy who's 17, a boy that is 17 years old, how can he be better than a Formula One world champion? Any idea? Well, but these Formula One world champions have more and more practice. He's just 17 years old. Yeah. One of the reasons why it is interesting, this is a metaphor with learning design, is the reason why these other car drivers are not so successful is that the tools that they have to their disposal are not so fit for purpose. So even if you put a world, I think everyone knows that Fernando Alonso is probably the best driver in the world, but he's currently last in the series. And the metaphor is, if you have the wrong learning design, you can put the best students in your course, but you will actually never help that student to succeed. So what we do in the university at the UK, we do, of course, things big. So what we have done is we've mapped learning designs of 151 modules where we per week, like very similar like with Linda, that we looked at what kind of activities students are expected to do. For example, in this case, assimilative activities or assessment, and then we looked at, okay, does it actually matter what kind of activities these students are doing? So in addition to lots of interesting qualitative data, we collect loads of data. And now I'm going to shut up again. So we have these 7 different learning activities that students are doing at the Open University. Which one do you think, because we're all here in learning analytics, which one do you think best predicts whether students are going to pass a course? Just shout out. Which learning activity do you think best predicts assessment? Yeah, could be, yeah. If students do well on assessment, they probably will do well in terms of retention. What else? Sorry? Experiential, yeah. So the more kind of creative, the game-based learning, continuously testing, anything else?
Productive.
Sorry?
Productive.
Productive, yeah, could be, yeah. Okay, so let's unpack this. So the beauty of big data and linking learning design with what students are actually doing, we can actually unpack which element of the car is actually driving our students. So what we've did, and this is only with 111,000 students, so it's a relatively small sample. We linked those 151 modules with student feedback. We linked it with student performance and VLE data. So this paper was just published last week. This is a blueprint of 151 modules, or 157 modules, about how the Open University designs their courses. So if you would study at the Open University, what kind of courses do you typically get at the Open University? Just seeing this box plot. Any ideas? What kind of typical courses do you get at the Open University based on this box plot? Lots and lots of chalk and talk, lots of reading and watching. While I was hoping that at the Open University we're the world leader of learning analytics, I think we do lots of interesting stuff here in the middle. But there are certain modules that don't even have any single element of communication in it. So this is an interesting blueprint, and if you want to learn more about this, just go to this paper. So what we then did, and I'm now shamelessly plugging our paper. We could only publish a short paper. The full paper is published in Computers and Human Behavior 4 weeks ago. So what we tried to do is we tried to link those 7 learning design activities with what students were doing in terms of VLE engagement, whether students were satisfied with this, and whether they actually led to retention. So this is the plug, and we corrected this by the different disciplines. So this is a screenshot. This is a time series of the different type of engagement of students over time with different kinds of blueprints of design. So some of the designs are chalk and talk, like the constructivist design. Some of the designs are more constructivist. And what you see here is a simple time series about the amount of minutes that students on average spend in this course. So just by this very simple overview of these 151 courses and dividing it into kind of 4 different kind of engines, what do you see in this graph? Any thoughts? Yeah, 3 out of the 4 seem to match a similar kind of pattern of engagement. But there is one, the social constructivist, which has lots more engagement, especially in the first couple of weeks. So now there's a kind of health and safety warning. This next picture looks really scary. So if you look at the constructivist module, most students work in this module for, on average, 100 minutes. And there is variation, but on average, it's 100 minutes per student per week. Similarly, with assessment, some modules have low engagement, some modules have slightly higher engagement. But in particular, if we look at the social constructivist design, which has loads of communication, loads of production, loads of interaction, in the first 10 weeks, none of the modules had less than 100 minutes of engagement. There was one module, if I would be tall enough, that had 1,200 minutes of engagement. So that's 20 hours of full engagement just in 1 week on average. So this metaphor already immediately shows you that the way how we design our influences how our students are learning. And of course, the next thing is to do correlation analysis to see, is there actually a link? So if you do correlation analysis, you see that if teachers have lots of chalk and talk, there is a negative correlation with how our students are engaging in the course, which is quite intuitive. If you have to read lots of stuff, our students over time seem to engage less. While if you do lots of interesting stuff, like finding information, communication, experiential learning, there is a positive correlation. And as Paul Kirchner said this morning, correlation does not mean causation. But with 113,000 students, we're pretty confident that these things hold. But the next step would be is, okay, this is only correlation, so can we actually do some more advanced modeling? So what we then did is, okay, what actually predicts VLE engagement? And what we did was we looked at the different kind of years, kind of levels that students engage, if this thing works, the different faculties, and we looked at the 7 learning design activities. And what basically the statistics tell you is that yes, our teachers design different courses at different levels, and the way how our teachers design our courses at different levels influences the behavior of our students. More importantly, and this is interesting from a management point of view, is that faculties, the way how faculties, and faculties is English for kind of different schools, so economics, science, etc. These faculties seem to influence the way how they design courses. So certain faculties have lots of communication, while other faculties seem to design blueprints which are much more chalk and talk. And this seems to influence significantly how our students are learning. But most interestingly, from a learning design perspective, the 2 key factors that influence engagement in this case is communication and experiential. So what this means is that if you design activities that ask students to communicate with each other or with the teacher, or if you have experiential activities, you get more engagement. Now let's have a look at satisfaction. So what kind of learning designs do the students actually like, right? Similarly, we can see there are different levels, but then we get this really puzzling result that if you ask the students what kind of courses do you like most, and if you link it to learning design, we get a negative predictor, negative beta for communication, we get a negative beta for experiential, and negative beta for assessment with, and I should mention this, with the reference value of assimilative. So students seem to like assimilative chalk and talk, right? And they don't seem to like communication and social constructivist elements. And it's like, oh no, because I'm a hardcore problem-based learning person, this can't be right. So, of course, as Paul Kirchner said this morning, you continue grinding the data until you find something that you want. So then we looked at performance, and we looked at, okay, what determines whether students actually pass the course or not pass the course? And then what we again find, yes, faculties influence the retention, the size of the module influences the retention, so the bigger the course, the more likely students drop out. But crucially, the number one predictor, and it explains a quite reasonable amount of variation, is communication. So when teachers design courses with lots of communication in their design, it leads, at least at the Open University, to better retention. So what you get is a quite interesting tension that on the one hand, these kind of more social constructivist learning designs lead to more VLE engagement, while these more kind of classical chalk and talk design lead to less VLE engagement. At the same time, what we see is that VLE engagement doesn't necessarily predict student satisfaction, and doesn't seem to necessarily predict student retention. But what we do see is that these kind of assimilative courses, this kind of constructivist learning design, positively influences and predicts student satisfaction, but it doesn't predict performance. So there's this really awkward tension between, do we want to have students that pass the courses, engagement and learning designs that lead to lots of engagement, that with learning design with lots of engagement, or do we want to have happy students? So the full paper is uploaded. I just uploaded this, so I'm really looking forward to your questions. Thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, yes, question already. We've got quite a few minutes actually, so we can get through a few.
Thank you. That was a very interesting talk. Thank you very much. I have a question about the last thing you said, which I think is very interesting. This tension that sometimes appears between what the students say they like and what appears to be more helpful for them to show learning in the exam. Whether that's learning or not, we can discuss at a different point. So my question is the following. In my experience and some of my colleagues that do active learning, usually students present friction when you try to go away from the traditional thing they have done since they were 5 years old, that the teacher talks, you listen, you come to the exam. Anything that goes out of that routine appears to be more work in the short term, so they resist, they present friction. But one trick that usually works well is saying on day one, hey, this is going to look like more work, but you will get a better mark in the exam in 4 months. That usually works in many groups, so from anecdotal experience. I wonder if you have tried something like that in this situation in which you have this tension as a way of diffusing the tension, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. I totally agree with you, and I think it links also very nicely with the keynote this morning. Learning is difficult. So it might be that initially you struggle with a particular content, but if you continuously are engaged, eventually you will transfer that knowledge, hopefully, into your long-term memory. So the interesting thing is, how can we transfer this message of, yes, social constructivist or active designs might be more difficult, but how can we transfer that message back to the students? At this point in time, the visualizations that I showed to you, they are only shown to teachers and are only constructed with teachers. What we're currently doing is showing these dashboards back to students so that they will know on a week-by-week basis, yes, this week is going to be hard because you're not going to watch interesting YouTube movies. You have to actually do some interesting experiment. And we're hoping that by bringing them along, eventually we get more satisfied students. Another thing, I have to be quite careful because the camera is rolling. Another potential reason why there is this tension between the two is that those students who survive at the Open University, they are the ones who can complete the survey. Those students who drop out halfway through the course by basically voting with their feet, they basically drop out. So it could be that the ones who eventually make it are the hardcore self-determined students, but they might not necessarily like it. So the key for us as the university is how can we ensure that these learning designs are fit for purpose for each individual learner. Good question.
Okay. We've got a question here, and Craig, did you have a question also? Yeah, okay.
So I want to comment, follow up on the previous point as well. We've seen that friction in a lot of places, and there's actually 3 axes we've identified. One is how much are students learning, one is how much are students perceiving that they're learning, and one is how much they engage, either how much time do they spend or do they stay with the system or not. And it's been very hard to, the places where we've seen some of those trade-offs, Khan Academy had a couple of experiments where you added in-video questions, students were confused, hated it. Yeah. Vicarious learning, students realized that they were confused, hated it. Adding active learning to the classroom, students had to work harder, they also didn't like it. It's been a very hard balance to reach between those 3 axes. Yeah,
I agree. And I guess, again, I'm aware that the camera is rolling, but most of our lectures are judged by student satisfaction scores at the Open University. If there's no relation between student satisfaction and performance, perhaps our senior management might have to take a look at this and see maybe we should start to change things, because we can see that with 151 modules that the way how teachers design our courses directly influences what our students are doing. So thank you for your question.
Just say it anyway. I think it might be on. So do you think that the way that teachers, instructors design courses is influenced strongly by student satisfaction surveys such that they trend to a particular learning design?
Thank you for that, because it allows me to give you slides I didn't show you yet. So what we did based on the initial study that we presented last year at LAK, we presented these results back to teachers and trying to encourage them indeed, yes, you are mostly teaching talk, but we can see from our retention that maybe different kinds of versions of learning design might actually help. So what we did, we tried to visualize to teachers their learning design decisions and try to, in a way, encourage them to rethink what they were doing and giving real-time visualizations of their learning designs. And in the metaphor, what we tried to do is also show them, okay, which Formula One cars are braking slightly later and which ones are taking slightly faster turns around the corner. So basically using that big data back to teachers, and what we then can see, coming back to answering your question, is those who didn't get that information also designed chalk and talk courses, while those who were given the post-design and were given much more information started to design much more interesting course. And this paper is coming out at Open Learning in a couple of weeks' time. So what we're trying to do with this research is to really start a dialogue with teachers to move them away from satisfaction to engagement and retention. So thank you for your question.
One more.
Yeah, it's a quick one. I have asked everybody the same thing. How are you gathering data about engagement? What is the algorithm? How do you define engagement?
In this case, we use a very crude proxy of just the number of minutes that students logged in a particular week. We're currently looking at much more fine-grained levels because we know that just the number of minutes per week is a very, very crude measurement. But this is like, we're first doing the low-hanging fruits, and the next question, of course, is these learning designs and the way how our students behave will be different for each individual. We've now only looked at a kind of aggregate across those 151 modules, but within each module there will be huge variation. So hopefully next year I can present that as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bart. Thank you.